Okay, so we've officially kind of kicked off the meeting. We're just going to give it maybe another minute to make sure all of our attendees can join the meeting. Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and kick it off. Hi, everyone. Just in means of introduction, my name is Angela Foose. I'm the Assistant Director for Development Services here at the City of Reno. And Grace and Lauren, why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
My name is Grace McAdin. I'm a Senior Management Analyst for Development Services in the City of Reno.
And I'm Lauren Knox. I'm a Senior Planner with Development Services at the city as well.
Great. So we have about an hour time slot set aside to go over some of the proposed changes that the city's looking at related to housing and affordability. This is something that we've been working on, kind of actively working on since last fall. I will say that housing and affordability is definitely a high priority for our city council. When we talked to city council, it was back in 2021, so 3 years ago, and we asked them to really prioritize from a zoning code perspective, some initiatives that they would like us to look at. Affordable housing was the #1 topic that they looked at. And that was everything from, affordable housing, meaning subsidized housing, housing supply, ADUs or accessory dwelling units, and short-term rentals. So really it's just a wide gamut of topics. I will add too that this isn't limited from a city perspective. We're not looking at affordable and housing as something just from a zoning code perspective. We're looking at it from a much broader perspective. But for today's purposes, what we are talking about is strictly related to our zoning code, things that we could do or initiatives that we can implement as part of housing and affordability. So again, I just wanted to make people understand that today's discussion is very limited, very narrow in the fact that we're just talking about from a zoning code perspective, things that we can do. So we initially kicked it off back in November. We had a big workshop with our city council, really just to talk about affordable housing in general. We had a gentleman by the name of Shane Phillips. He's an author. He came in and talked to the city council about some things that just from a national perspective, this is not unique. Everyone across the nation, all jurisdictions, regardless of the city size or location, is really just dealing with this, as we're calling, kind of housing crisis. And it's everything from the price of housing, whether it's rent or a mortgage. It's also a supply issue. A lot of people just don't have the ability to have housing. And so, from a bigger picture, take a step back. This is not something that is unique to Reno or Nevada. It's something that we are all kind of struggling with and trying to come up with solutions to help solve it. So again, today we're going to talk about 4 different initiatives that we've been talking about with our council, with our planning commission, and with the community. And at this point, we're just trying to get feedback. And what we will do, we'll take that feedback over the course of the next couple of weeks. We're doing these stakeholder meetings. We'll take that feedback to our council, share with them the information that we're hearing, and then see if we can draft something that they can support, and in hopes that we can get, some initiatives moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the group. And just in terms of process, we will hold all the questions until the very end of the presentation, just so we can make sure we get through the presentation within this hour. Okay, so Grace and Lauren, am I sharing okay? Awesome. Okay, so then to kick it off, again, kind of the question is, why are we doing this initiative? Why housing and affordability now? So as part of some of the other work that we're working on here in the planning department, we are updating our zoning code. And with that, we adopted a new zoning code 3 years ago. So we're going back and just doing some cleanups. And so housing was something that we looked at as part of the cleanup discussion. And council said, well, let's take that out of the broader zoning code cleanup. Anything to do with housing or affordability, let's focus on that as an individual item to make sure we can get some really focused feedback. And it's not part of our bigger zoning code cleanup. So that kind of prompted us to say, okay, let's go out and do some stakeholder meetings. We did hold stakeholder meetings on this topic back in January. We went to our planning commission and had them review it, and they made some recommendations. That was in February. And so before we go back to City Council with all of those recommendations, we wanted to reach out again to the community and see if the community supports some of the things that Planning Commission was in support of. So kind of two topics here that we're looking at. Again, one is affordability. Truly the affordable housing is something that is typically subsidized by some kind of grants or some kind of other funding source. We don't get a ton of affordable housing in this community. Generally speaking, we probably get 2 to 3 housing projects per year that are truly affordable housing. Everything else we would consider to be market rate. So a lot of times developers will say, oh, I'm providing affordable housing. It's really not affordable unless it has been subsidized and they can show that it's, either deed restricted or there's some truly financial help on that project. So just to make sure everyone understands kind of some of these terms, housing is one topic, the supply of housing, how can we help with that was one topic. And then the affordability really is that second topic. The other kind of big push as to why we're trying to do something on the affordable housing item right now is based on the state legislature that was just finished this last June. And a new bill came out. So it's Assembly Bill 213. And with that, they have a pretty strict requirement. And I put it up here just kind of verbatim so that everyone can see where this is coming from. So before July 1st of this year, so we have a couple more months, local government bodies, and we're a city of Reno, we are required to adopt an ordinance. And there's two things that ordinance has to address. One is expediting or speeding up permit review for affordable housing projects. Again, this is strictly limited to affordable, meaning the subsidized affordable housing. It's not just housing in general, it has to be affordable. So we have to come up with some ordinance that shows how we're addressing expediting review process. And then the second piece is how are we incentivizing affordable housing projects? And so the legislation, or the legislators, at first, when they started writing this bill, they came up with some very strict regulations, and it was going to be something that impacted everybody equally, whether it was Henderson or Clark or Washoe. Something that I think a lot of the local jurisdictions pushed back on. We as local jurisdictions like to write our own zoning regulations. We want to make it sure it's something that we can enforce. And so I think on a positive side, all the local jurisdictions were able to say, okay, let's take a step back. And the legislators agreed and said, okay, local jurisdictions, you guys individually come up with your own ordinance, as long as you address those two topics specific to affordable housing. So we took that information, we said, okay, we will specifically address those two topics. And we are trying to get something adopted by our city council before that July 1st deadline. So we didn't just come up with some crazy ideas. We went back and we said, this is not a unique problem. Affordability is not something that's just Nevada. What are other jurisdictions doing? And so, you just Google housing and there's a ton of information out there about what other cities and counties are doing. So on one side, that was good because it gave us a good kind of starting point to look at what other jurisdictions are doing. And some are going extremely extreme, like on completely one end of the pendulum, so to speak. And so we said, whoa, that seems a little much maybe to start off with some of these changes. Is there something we can do that kind of helps to slowly, incrementally make these changes without just throwing a bunch of ideas out there and say, whoops, I hope it works and I hope we don't screw up our community. So we really tried to come up with some language that our community could support and our council could support, but at the same time trying to meet the needs of what the legislation asks us to do. So again, this is just some ideas. Nothing is set in stone. We're just looking for feedback. Okay, so we have kind of 4 topics. 2 of those are specific to affordable housing. So I just wanted to make sure what we're talking about right now is not market rate housing. This is, again, truly the subsidized affordable housing. Those are the projects that, again, we get maybe 2 to 3 a year. So very, very limited type of development that we just don't get a lot of. So next 2 topics is specific to affordable housing. All right, our goal then is to come up with something to expedite affordable housing projects and also to incentivize affordable housing projects. Number 1, this is what staff proposed. Projects that meet a certain level of affordability. So we call that area median income. if you meet that affordability, then you would be able to go straight to a building permit. So we're trying to find ways to expedite the review process. If you're at 60% of the average median income or area median income, then you qualified. If you're still providing some kind of affordability, but overall your project does not meet that 60% area median income, then you wouldn't qualify. But for those projects that meet that 60%, you would be able to go straight to a building permit. Now, the caveat here is you have to be in a zoning district that allows for apartments. So you can't just build apartments wherever you want and say they're affordable. By this requirement, you still have to be in a zoning district that allows apartments. So number one, just the property you're looking at, does it have zoning that allows apartments? And typically that's in most of our multifamily or mixed use zoning districts. If the answer is yes, then next we would say, are you still meeting all of the building code requirements? You absolutely have to meet all the building code requirements and fire code requirements. No getting around that. From a zoning perspective, things that we look at is, do you have landscaping? Do you have parking? Are you meeting your building setbacks? So you still have to meet all those requirements. The intent here was to help these projects move forward, still meeting all the code requirements, but getting out of some of these longer timeline processes. So if you're meeting those affordable housing project requirements, our proposal was that you can go straight to a building permit and don't have to go through a public hearing process. But again, you still have to meet all of the zoning code, building code, fire code requirements. Next one then is when it comes to a building permit, we currently don't prioritize review time on affordable housing projects. And so a lot of jurisdictions out there are saying, if you are doing an affordable housing project and you're at a building permit review, we would expedite that permit process. So what we're proposing is we would have a staff person that would be assigned to those projects 2 to 3 years. It's not a major time suck for our staff, but we would basically serve as kind of a liaison to help them make sure that they are getting all their questions answered and that we're meeting with them on a really consistent basis to help them process through that building permit review. Again, not circumventing any rules or regulations. We just help them kind of hold their hand as they go through that process. So those are the things that staff recommended. Now we took that to our planning commission, and here's what planning commission recommended. They agreed. They said, we support that. However, we think you should go a couple steps further. So they also added, if the project is affordable, meaning it meets that 60% area median income, then you would be able to add 2 additional stories to your building. So we have an example here of what that could look like. This is an existing affordable housing project. It was recently built in the last, I think, 1.5 years. It's a 3-story building. So we just did some photoshopping to show you what 2 additional stories would look like. And again, per that zoning district, they were limited to only be 3 stories in height. If Planning Commission's recommendation was approved, as an example, that's what the 5-story building would look like. Now, the other thing Planning Commission recommended was also add some flexibility on building setbacks. So again, staff's recommendation was you still have to meet all the setbacks and all the zoning code regulations. We don't get to circumvent that. Planning Commission's recommendation was that you would be able to allow for closer setbacks. And so again, that was Planning Commission's recommendation, not necessarily coming from staff, but they felt that that was something that would help developers to build more square footage by not having to meet building setbacks. And then the third one, specific to affordable housing, Planning Commission recommended that we remove any parking requirements. From their perspective, if an affordable housing project wanted to come forward and provide parking, great. But if they chose not to have parking on their site and maybe allowed their tenants to just park on the street, then they felt that is something that we should just administratively allow. And again, that was their recommendation. So those are kind of the 3 things that they added that City Council will have to weigh in and decide if they agree with that. Okay, so next topic is related to density bonus. And again, we're still talking about just affordable housing projects. Currently in our zoning code, we already allow a density bonus. This means if you are allowed to have 10 units, density bonus allows you to have more units. The density that you're allowed to have is based on whatever your zoning district is. And it changes depending on where you're at. So again, just as a general example, let's say you're allowed to have 10 units. Right now, our zoning code says if you do affordable housing, we'll give you up to 45% more in the number of units. So that's been in code for probably 20 years. And I think we've had maybe one additional unit added using this density bonus. So again, this is not something we felt is being used highly or frankly at all. So we said it's something that we've heard developers say that if they could get a couple more units, it would make their project pencil. So we said, yeah, if we've been doing it and we haven't had a lot of input, maybe we need to increase the amount that you can increase on your density bonus. So under our new staff proposed language, if you do that affordable housing, again, you're meeting that 60% area median income, so it's pretty affordable, then you would be able to add unlimited density. Now you're still capped at all the building requirements. So again, from staff's perspective, you can't go taller. You have to, whatever your zoning code limits, you're basically just trying to put more units in the square footage that you would already be allowed to do that. So that was one thing that we proposed. The other thing that we proposed is let's look beyond just that 60% area median income. And what about that workforce housing? You know, we really don't have any incentives right now for developers to do workforce housing. And that's anywhere from like an 80% area median income or up to 120%. So, I mean, that's everything from, you know, planners and teachers and people that maybe just aren't making enough to be able to live in the Reno market just based on the cost of housing. So this would allow hopefully more of those types of units to come online because we're offering more incentives. So if you are in that 60% to 120%, we would give you additional density bonuses. It's pretty small in terms of how much additional density we're proposing. So again, I don't anticipate a whole lot of new development coming forward with that. So we proposed that to Planning Commission and they didn't have any changes. They supported that and they didn't have any modifications to the density bonus incentives. Okay, so those are the two kind of topics specifically tied to affordable housing. So hopefully our goal was to address what the state legislature wanted us to do, to speed up review times and to provide some incentives for affordable housing. So that again, specific to just the affordable housing issues. Now, our next topic, and looking at more globally, the housing crisis, we're looking at just housing supply. Now, one of the things we've seen a lot in other jurisdictions is what we call the missing middle. You know, there's a lot of apartments being built. There's a lot of single family homes being built. There's also kind of that middle, you know, housing product. What about things like a duplex or a triplex? More townhome type projects. And so what can we as a city do to help incentivize more of these developments? So that's kind of specifically what we're talking about next. This has nothing to do with being affordable. This is strictly market rate. So again, I just want you to make sure you understand separating the two. Okay. In our code right now, so this is something we currently allow, market rate, so just your average apartment, we do allow a density bonus. And this is based on the size of your unit. What we're trying to do is encourage more infill. You know, as a region, we want to see more infill rather than sprawling development. And so we're looking for ways that we can kind of incentivize developers to allow, you know, maybe more units to come into their smaller footprints. So what we currently have in our code is kind of these three different levels of density bonus, and it's based on the square footage. So if your units that are about 1,800 square foot, these are your apartment projects. These are your pretty big apartment projects. Typically, that would be more like a 3-bedroom apartment. Currently, you're allowed to do a density bonus, again, to get more units on your lot. Currently, you're allowed to do 15% more units. So let's say you had 10 units and you were able to use this density bonus in this example. An additional 15% units would get you one more unit. What we're proposing is just to increase that density bonus. So instead of just adding that one more unit, you'd be able to add 3 more units in that example. Now, if you're smaller in size, so closer to 1,400 square feet, we give you more ability to do density bonus. Right now, we allow you to do 30% more units. With that density bonus that we're proposing, it would go up to 45% more. And then finally, in that really kind of that smaller group, 1,000 square foot individual unit, we would allow you to go from a 45% maximum density bonus and increase that up to 80%. So as our example, let's say you're allowed to do 10 units and they're 1,000 square feet in size, so fairly small. Currently, you would add 4 more units with that density bonus, and that would go up with an 80% increase of density bonus. So then you could add 8 more units. So just going back, because this has been in our code for the last 3 years, we have had about 12 projects, all infill projects, that have come forward and requested this density bonus. And so we're thinking, wow, the city is really going to explode with this density bonus. It's not. In 3 years, we've added 60 units to the entire housing market. And so we just want to give you a better example of, just these aren't huge leaps and bounds in terms of development. It's something we've been trying. And so incrementally, we're saying, well, maybe we need to increase it to see if we can get some more. So let's go through and just go through a couple examples of who has used that density bonus so you can better kind of visualize what that looks like. We had a Motel 6. It was a motel. This is over off of Stardust and kind of 7th and Keystone area. And so it had, I think, 124 motel rooms, and they wanted to convert those into individual units that they could rent. And so they put in kitchens and upgraded the bathrooms. So it really kind of helped just to take an existing building rather than having to tear that down or let it sit there vacant. They were able to kind of rehab it. So based on what the zoning allowed, they could only have 88 units on this site. And they used that density bonus and they were able to get an additional 36 units. So the benefit here is they didn't have to add any additional square footage. It literally was taking the exact same building footprint and just adding kitchens and upgrading the units. So they were able to really reuse and get more housing stock on the market. So that was, I think, a good example. Another one, is a brand new construction. So this is an area off of Wells. It's an area called Grand Canyon. It's over by PJ's restaurant, that general area. A lot of just kind of smaller parcels over there. This one's less than half an acre in size, so pretty small piece of property. And they had to fit in, all their parking and all their landscaping. And they were allowed to have 16 units just based on what the property was zoned. Tiny site again, they could build 16 units. Now they used that density bonus and they got an additional 2 units. So not something that as an outsider, you would even see the difference from 16 units. Now they have 18 units, but again, incrementally adding additional 2 units, brand new housing development, beautiful project on the inside. These are the kind of infill projects that this density bonus is really targeting. Okay, next up is something we call the missing middle. This is probably a great example of that picture there. Again, we have everything from apartments to, single family homes, but there's a ton of types of developments in the middle that we just, here in the city of Reno, we don't get a whole lot of other options. And that's something we're trying to fix. When we have developers come in and saying, wow, not everybody wants to live in a single family home. And not everybody wants to live in an apartment. Is there something else in the middle? So currently in our code, if you are in these specific zoning districts, we probably have, I don't know, maybe 20 different zoning districts, but this is specific to these 5 different zoning districts, our multifamily districts, our neighborhood commercial, our general commercial, and our professional office. We do allow apartments in these zoning districts. But if you are doing anywhere from 20 units up to 100 units, we require that you go through an entitlement process. So it's a much longer process. You have to submit additional applications and pay more fees, and it goes through a longer review process. This does go through a public review process in terms of we send notices out to the neighbors where they can comment. So we looked at other jurisdictions and we said, well, is this normal? Does everybody else require apartment projects that are less than 100 units to have to go through some kind of public review process? And it's not normal. I mean, even just locally, we looked at Sparks, Washoe County, Henderson, Fernley. Kind of the trigger that most jurisdictions use is more than 100 units would go through some kind of a public review process. And so we said, well, looking at what a lot of the other communities are doing, and not just Nevada, but also outside of Nevada, we said, well, maybe that's something we can do to help incentivize and speed up review processes. So again, specific to those zoning districts that we mentioned, apartment projects that are less than 100 units would be able to go straight to a building permit and not have to go through a public hearing process. You still have to meet all your requirements, still have to meet your building height and your parking requirements and your landscape requirements and your density requirements. So you don't circumvent any of that. It just means you don't have to go through that additional public review process. Okay. An example of just so you can visualize a couple projects that have come through in the past couple years. Here's some projects that are either constructed or in the construction stage now. Vesta Apartments, that's one kind of in the Midtown area. It was proposed for 40 units, so pretty small. It has parking on the bottom and 3 stories above that. And then that middle one, the Orvada Apartments, that was actually an affordable housing project. Again, 40 units, so not a big project, but they did have to go through an additional review process. And then on the very right, that Grand Canyon Apartments, again, that one we just mentioned, it was small, 18 units, and they did have to go through a pretty lengthy review process to get their 18 units approved rather than going straight to a building permit. Okay. And we're on the last one now. And then, like I said, we'll open it up to questions at the end. So this topic is dealing with missing middle, and some examples of pictures on the bottom are really what we're focusing on. This is the things like a duplex, which is 2 units that are attached, or a triplex, 3 units that are attached, or a fourplex, obviously 4 units that are attached. So we currently allow these duplex, triplex, and fourplex in 2 of our single family zoning districts. So you can do them right now with a conditional use permit. We do not get a ton of any of this housing projects in Reno. It's interesting. We went back and we looked at, gosh, in the last 3 years, how many duplexes have come forward through a building permit process? 26. So in 3 years, we've had 26 duplexes come through our building permit process. Well, what about triplex, right? Those 3 units, we've had 14. In 3 years, we've only had 14 triplex projects. And then finally, fourplex. We've had 10 building permits came through requesting to do fourplex. Some of those building permits didn't even finalize, meaning the developer stopped in the middle and didn't move forward with development. So this to me was another one where I don't anticipate by allowing duplex, triplex in 2 additional new zoning districts that we're going to see a whole lot of push, especially in these single family zoning districts where we've already allowed them. And we just haven't seen many developers come forward. So this seemed like another kind of small win, maybe for the missing middle, that incrementally we can see if it's going to make a difference if we start allowing them in these 2 new zoning districts. So let's just do an example. This one I thought was good. It's a map. Everywhere in green is where you today can build a duplex, triplex, and fourplex. And it's hard to see it, but there's quite a few zoning districts here in the city where you can do that today. And again, we're just not seeing a huge push for this kind of a product yet. So our proposal was to also allow them in 2 new zoning districts, single family, that SF3 and that SF5. That's we have 4 total single family zoning districts, and 2 of them today. You can already do this with a conditional use permit. So we'd be adding it to 2 new single family zoning districts. Now, from staff's perspective, we still added the requirement that you have to go through a conditional use permit. We did not propose just to say you can do it by right. Incrementally, we just want to make sure that we're not doing anything too drastic. So our proposal was that allow them in these 2 new single family zoning districts, but still require that they have to go through a full public hearing process or a conditional use permit. Now, when we took that to Planning Commission was in support and also said, I think you should do more. So from their perspective, they felt that in our 4 single family zoning districts, we should allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex by right, meaning no public hearing, straight to a building permit. So again, that was not staff's recommendation, but that was something that Planning Commission recommended. And so we'll take that message to council and see if they support that. Just so you can see the difference then, if we were to allow that duplex, triplex, and fourplex by right, straight to a building permit, no public review process, everything in that kind of orangish, yellowish color are the areas or the zoning districts that would be impacted by that change. Okay, so just one thing I want to highlight, there's been a lot of misinformation out there. And I just want to make sure that everyone kind of understands, that this isn't intended to blow up single family development. We as staff, we're truly trying to do very small incremental things. I want to highlight too that you still have to meet all of your building code and all of your fire codes and all of your zoning codes. This not proposing to circumvent any of that. The other thing we're hearing is this is going to completely change single family zoning district. Again, from a market rate perspective, the bulk of what we see for apartments, we're not proposing to make any changes that would allow more than what you have today. So no, you wouldn't be able to come in with an apartment complex if this changed for just your standard apartment complex in your single family zoning districts any more than you could do today. We're not proposing that at all. For those affordable housing projects, you have to have a zoning district that allows for apartments. Again, our proposal that you would be able to go straight to a building permit, but you have to initially be in a zoning district that even allows apartments. So just wanted to highlight that and make sure that there's a comfort level that no, we are not proposing something wild and crazy. Just, I hope people understand that we're trying to do something that incrementally we can look at and, you know, assess every couple of years, are we right on track? So with that, next steps. We're doing these stakeholder meetings this week and next week. We have 3 more stakeholder meetings next week. It's the same information. So if you just want to, you know, share this with any of your friends or neighbors, let them know they can get the same information at any of our stakeholder meetings next week. And then we will be going to City Council on May 8th and just presenting the ideas. Again, we're going to let them know what Planning Commission's recommendations were. And then we're going to get their feedback. And I'm guessing they're going to make some changes to what's been proposed. And then we'll go back again later in May and share that and hopefully have an ordinance that we can move forward. Again, per kind of our mandate by the state legislature is we need to have something adopted. We need an ordinance adopted before July 1st. So that is the time frame we're looking to meet. Specific to affordable housing. So it's very likely, you know, council could say, I only want to touch affordable housing. I don't want to touch anything else, in which case we can do that. If they just want to scale some of this back, or if they want to move it even more intense, we'll see where they want to go on that topic. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Again, it's about 12:30, so we have about a 30-minute window for questions. If we need to extend that, we can go past that. But if there's people that, you know, only have an hour, then we'll let you go. And again, thank you for your feedback. So
Angela, looks like we have a couple comments or questions in the chat. Not sure if you can see it.
Oh, great. Yep. So it looks like Beth, resident of Reno for 7 years, formerly of Truckee for 20 years, was also a previous council member, lots of experience in affordable housing, and it sounds like just housing in general. Happy to get involved. That would be wonderful. Tried to join a citizen advisory committee several weeks ago in Ward 1, but was denied and ignored by Jenny Breckus. So yeah, Beth, did you want to add anything just for the group, or was that just more of a... There we go.
Beth, you should be able to talk if you wanted to take yourself off mute. If you had anything to add.
And
I do
yeah.
have your email, Beth, so and you have mine, so feel free to reach out if anything comes up after the fact.
Okay. All right, and then next question. So Rachel, it looks like, so question here, if requirements for that minor and major deviation for setbacks are eliminated, and again, that was specific to affordable housing projects, how would this be handled if the site was next to a single family home or was located on a parcel zone, let's say MF 30? And then would this still require setbacks because of the existing single family home or trigger any height limitations? So just as a heads up for everyone, we currently have zoning code requirements that if you are in these multifamily zoning districts or in single family zoning districts, and you're coming in with a new development and you're next door to a single family zoning district, we add additional setback requirements. So you have your standard building setback, and that's how far your building is from the property line. Again, every setback's different depending on your zoning district. Our zoning code does require additional setbacks. If you are over more than 2 feet, 2 stories, you have to have, your building has to be stepped back even further. So that's in our code today. And again, what Planning Commission was recommending specific to affordable housing is that there'd be no restrictions on setbacks. So that would mean they would not have to meet their setback requirements, and it wouldn't matter if they were adjacent to a single family or multifamily. Again, from Planning Commission's perspective, the more affordable housing we can get on the market, the better. From staff's perspective, we propose that you still have to meet your setback requirements. And so we'll see where city council goes on that topic. And then next question from Rachel, if you go straight to a building permit, assuming the zoning is by right and there's no deviations or variations, what's the anticipated timeline to approve? So this has been one of our challenges here at the city. We have a very fast review timeline. So on average, let's say you come in with a new 30-unit apartment project. So you submit. Our staff reviews it and it goes through a number of different departments. We have planning staff, building staff, fire staff, the health department, engineering staff. Everyone looks at it kind of based on their set of, rules and requirements. And we provide comments within 10 days. That's 10 business days. So we take 2 weeks to review and provide comments. Now, I'd say 0% of the time is a project ever approved on the first round. So, basically never. We spend a lot of time making sure they're meeting all the code requirements. So then the developer goes back and makes the changes. Their architect makes changes, their engineer makes changes. And so sometimes they can get back to us within a couple of weeks. Sometimes it takes them months to get back to us. That's out of our control. But our review time, again, it takes us 2 weeks to do our initial round of reviews. Once they resubmit their changes, it takes us 3 days to go back through that review cycle. Now, what we're finding is that all of that seems very fast, but again, depending on how many changes the design team has to make, it typically takes months to get through a building permit review process. If there were 0 edits, which there never is, then they could be reviewed within, and approved within 10 days. But that I'm not sure that's ever happened on any project. So just know, typically it takes 3 to 4 rounds of reviews, and generally it takes months in between our comments for the developer to make changes and get back to us. Rachel, did you want to add anything while we're going over your questions? We'll move you over to the chat room.
Oh, looks like she denied. So if you have anything else, Rachel, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. All right, so next question. What is the city's definition of affordable, and are these properties going to RHA, which is the Reno Housing Authority? So we follow just national guidelines on affordability. That is something that is not determined by the city. It's determined by HUD or, federal standards. And so just as an example, every year they come out with some new affordability guidelines, and it's based on where you're at. So within kind of Reno Sparks, Washoe County, we have affordability guidelines. So as an example, let's say you are a family of 4. I got some math here. 60% of your area median income. So a family of 4 assumes that if you are affordable, $62,000 is what you are bringing in for a family of 4. So 60% of the area median income would be you're spending about $1,500 on rent for a family of 4 that's making about $62,000 a year. And it changes. If you're a family of 2, there's a different calculation. If you're, a family of 1 or a person of 1, different calculation. But generally speaking, right now, affordability at 60% area median income is you're making about $62,000 a year. 80%, or that area median income of about 80%, assumes a family of 4 is bringing home about $83,000 a year to be considered affordable. And then if you are a family of 4 meeting 120% of the area median income, you're looking at making about $125,000. Now, these are really high numbers, but that just tells you how hard it is to find a place to live and afford in the city of Reno. Very expensive to live here. So again, we follow just HUD guidelines on what's considered to be affordable. And then it says, are these properties going to the Reno Housing Authority? Not necessarily. Reno Housing Authority definitely has a huge list of apartment projects and developments that they support and fund. There's also a number of different affordable housing developers around town that do affordable housing. And just so we can be clear too, we do require that you deed restrict your property for 20 years. So you can't come in and say, oh, I want to use all these incentives for affordable housing, and then you build this project and you only provide the affordable rates for a year. We deed require it, deed restrict it for 20 years. Anything that gets government money, subsidized HUD funding, also has to go through annual reviews where they have to do reporting. So they have to report what their rents are. So that's how we kind of have that checks and balances to make sure that these projects that receive these incentives are actually meeting that affordability for the long term. All right, so then next question back to Rachel. So Tumwa question, can the city provide any assistance with expediting timelines for approvals through Tumwa? Any relief to impact fees that are very high for affordable housing? So Tumwa, which is the Truckee Meadows Water Authority, they are the agency that handles anything to do with new water. We have zero authority over them. It's like asking us to tell the state how to do their job or NV Energy how to do their job. We have zero authority. I will say we have regular meetings with Tumwa where we talk a lot about how we can coordinate better. You know, we help them, they help us. If there's a project that like we're struggling with from a utility perspective, a lot of times we'll reach out to their engineers and say, hey, our plans aren't matching up with what your plans are showing. How can we better coordinate with this developer to make this work? So no, we can't mandate, we can't tell them to do anything, but we do a ton of coordination with the Tumwa engineering staff, and they're super great to work with. So from that perspective, we do what we can to help these development projects move forward. And then next question on that is impact fees for affordable housing projects. So just, I don't know if everyone knows this, but any type of new development in Reno has impact fees. You pay road fees. They call it regional road impact fees. You pay that regardless if you're building in Reno or Sparks or Washoe County. You also pay sewer connection fees, also very expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars for affordable housing or just housing in general. So we have a ton of different fees that we charge. We charge park fees, we charge, gosh, so many other things. And so that's, again, kind of how we pay for all these different things. For the last 3 or so, 4 years, we have been subsidizing a lot of these affordable housing projects. We have spent, gosh, probably close to, I don't know, 8 million maybe in subsidizing sewer connection fees, and probably $500,000 in subsidizing affordable housing building permit fees. So we have a very limited pot of money to do that. Reno's the only jurisdiction right now that does that. Other jurisdictions around the state are allowed to do it, but Reno's the only one that has done it. But it comes to a cost as us as well, right? So while we're subsidizing all these other affordable housing projects, it's great. But we still have to pay for infrastructure for the entire city. So we are, this year, we will probably run out of money within kind of that bucket of us to subsidize sewer and building permit fees for affordable housing. So something that at the state level, we're definitely going to push this next legislative session to see if there's other funding sources at the state level that local jurisdictions can use to help fund some of those impact fees for affordable housing. Great question. Okay. Trudy, so is there a minimum square footage, looks like, for communal living allowed in any existing zoning districts? So depending on what your zoning district is, we have limitations on what can be built. So for instance, in a single family zoning districts, you can do single family homes. In some single family zoning districts, you can do apartments. As you start looking at other districts, we have multifamily zoning districts, we have commercial zoning districts. So that's, there's not a one size fits all. Depending on what your zoning district is, A, we limit what you can build there. And B, we do have minimum lot sizes for what you can do that. Some of it's maximum lot size too. But the question here is more communal living. I'm not sure that we really have maybe a definition of communal living. We do allow, multiple buildings on one parcel. If you're in a multifamily zoning district, you can have multiple units, whether it's a single family or a multifamily or a duplex on one parcel. We do allow that today. Depends on what your zoning district is. So I don't know that that really answers your question, but again, it sounds like it probably kind of depends on what your definition of communal living is. And maybe Trudy, at the end, let's see if we can maybe bring you in and we can answer that question. Minimum per unit. Yeah, same thing. Let's touch base maybe at the end of the meeting once we get through these questions, and let's see if we can answer that in more detail. Okay, Rachel, it looks like the square foot home or single family homes are located on parcels that are zoned MF 30. I think maybe that's a question Do we allow single family homes maybe on properties zoned MF30? We do. So MF30 means 30 units per acre. It's a maximum that you can build. We allow apartments, we allow single family, we allow duplex, triplex, fourplex. We allow all those by right. As is, again, depending on what your zoning district is and how many units you're trying to build, could trigger some other requirements, but we do allow single family on those properties zoned multifamily 30. Okay, and Sally, if I live in an SF8 old neighborhood and it has established CCNRs, which does not allow apartments and businesses, would this be ignored with the new proposal? No, that's a great question. So the city does not regulate CCNRs. You guys are part of an HOA, and so you guys have the ultimate authority to restrict whatever you want as part of those CCNRs. So we would not allow development, for instance, apartments. If even our zoning code allowed apartments, if your CCNRs restrict apartments, then that would trump our zoning code. So any existing neighborhoods that have those CCNRs, you guys could continue to live through those. And any new development that comes on board, any new CCNRs are created. Also, you guys, those CCNRs trump anything in our zoning code. So if you have more restrictive requirements, then development would be limited to that. I just want to add to these changes are specific to City of Reno, where we have just standard zoning. A lot of our city is built around planned unit developments. So all of Somerset, most of South Meadows, most of Collin Ranch, all of those are part of master planned communities where they have their own set of zoning regulations. So this doesn't touch them. For instance, in some of Somerset today, you can have accessory dwelling units or those granny flats, not all over Somerset, but in certain areas of Somerset. In the city of Reno, we do not allow accessory dwelling units or granny flats, except for in very, very limited areas. So generally speaking, again, anything with a planned unit development or a master plan community has its own set of regulations, and this doesn't touch those regulations. Okay, Ron, it looks like with the term by right expansion in an ordinance, allow that missing middle development of duplex, triplex, and fourplex, and what's currently zoned SF3, if it's not permitted in a homeowner's CCNR. So again, no, if you have CCNRs or a planned unit development that restricts any of that duplex, triplex, fourplex, then that trumps any of these changes. Next then, where's the proposed ordinance available to read and comment on? And is there a new or revised ordinance? And then is there anything included about rent control? So from a zoning perspective, we have zero authority over rent control. So the only thing we're touching right now is what we have control over within our zoning code. So nothing proposed, at least in our zoning code, related to rent control. I know that's a topic from a higher level that the state's been having, and some of our council members have brought up a few times, but no, as part of this discussion, we're only dealing with our zoning code, so nothing about rent control. We will, Grace, can we put in a link to our
Yes.
red line document?
I'm going to put it in the chat, and so hopefully everyone can see it there. And that will link you to the website, and on that website are the housing red lines that you can click on.
Perfect. Okay, next question. Boarding houses are a type of communal living. There are other types with more privacy. Yep, so let me, we'll pull that information up to see where we currently allow boarding houses, and then I'll provide that information to you. Off the top of my head, I don't know. This doesn't affect any changes to boarding houses or rooming houses, but we will pull up the information so you can see where we currently allow it. All right. Next question from Sally. What about the historic areas of Reno? And I'm guessing that's probably more like the Wells Avenue. There's some kind of historic areas over there. The Newlands is also an area. A lot of historic areas over there. So all of those areas are based, again, on zoning. So if their zoning district currently allows apartments or duplex or triplex, then this would be part of that. We're not really pulling out any historic areas. I think just in terms of data, hold on, let me get a map. Newlands is an area we get a lot of questions on, so I did pull up what most of the zoning districts are within the Newlands. There's quite a bit of the Newlands zoned MF14, so it's currently zoned multifamily. So a lot of those kind of smaller parcels where they have 1 or 2 units, especially if there's an alley, that would stay in place. Again, we're not proposing any changes. You can today do apartments. You can today do duplex, triplex, fourplex. So that wouldn't change. You could do that today. You also have some zoning districts in the Newlands called SF8 and SF5. And so again, with these proposed changes, SF8 and SF5 are the 2 zoning districts that today you cannot do duplex, triplex, and fourplex. So staff was proposing to allow duplex, triplex, and fourplex in those 2 zoning districts, but only with a public hearing process. Planning Commission said we should allow it by right and not require that public hearing process. So that's kind of the 2 different opinions on that, and we'll see where council goes. Okay, so let's go back. Grace or Lauren, were you able to pull up any information on the boarding house?
Yes, I did. I just sent it in a response to the question. I don't know if everyone can see the response or maybe just Trudy. But generally, the boarding and rooming house use is allowed in most of our residential districts with a conditional use permit. So that includes SF3, SF5, SF8, and then the MF14, 21, and 30 zones.
All right. And then Grace just put in a link to the chat. What we can also do is forward anyone that wants to send us an email. I think Grace's email was on all the meeting invites. So if you have questions, you can send them to Grace and we can forward it to the group here. And then we can send out the link for everyone that wants to see the red line document. And we also want to encourage everyone to provide public comment to Planning Commission, and City Council. Again, this goes to City Council for just discussion on May 8th. They're not making any formal recommendations, but they're just going to give us some feedback. So the more input they have, whether you love this, hate this, share your opinion. Yeah, at this point, I think the best thing we can do is just get community feedback so that we can share that with our council and then they can make more informed decisions. Any other questions for the group? Wonderful. Well, we've actually kept it within the hour, so I appreciate that. And again, if you have any follow-up questions before or after you want to see a copy of the presentation, we can send any of that your way. We do have 3 more meetings next week, so if you feel like you missed something, feel free to join one of the meetings next week, and hopefully we can answer your questions there as well. Okay. Again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, everyone.